Hey, Planeswalkers, hope you're doing well and staying safe, and hope you filled your bellies off of a nice turkey dinner there for Thanksgiving for those of you in the States. But welcome to today's episode of Friday Night Meta, a weekly series here on the Multiverse. Is yours truly, your host, Mythras, Metamaster Mythras, that is, in today's episode. So very excited. This is our next snapshot in terms of the Innistrad Crimson Vow season. A couple interesting things going on. We'll talk about that here today. I'm looking forward to getting into it. So appreciate you tuning in. Flip me a like if you enjoyed today's video. If you got a question, if you got a comment, let me know down below. Love to hear from you as always. Additionally, my friends, feel free to hop on the Discord server. That's in the details, along with today's timestamps, where we'll break down each of the formats: standard, historic Brawl, best of one, best of three. Additionally, we'll take a look at some of the impacts potentially for this week. So I'm very excited. Like I said, thanks for tuning in. As always, great ways to stay up to date on the channel, with a lot of different ways down below in the description. Great things for you as well. Thank you for all the members. Last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on latest and greatest content, my friends. So here's what we got going on today. When we look at the meta at a broad level, bronze to mythic here, standard best of one, we continue to see mono white aggro dominating. Very, very tight here at the top end though, with what we see, and then it goes all the way down a shift in about 10%. So that's a big one. Now, these are the top 8 most popular decks. So we can see that as part of the archetype, but very, very powerful here when we see 24% being on mono white aggro. So very, very crazy there when you look at that. And then you can see all the way down the bottom, Dimmer Zombies still being very popular here with 4%. So we can see how these things have adjusted. Again, mono white staying very strong, mono green Stompy dropping off a little bit. The biggest pickup here is really becoming mono black control. Now you can see a lot of these win rates starting to come up from some of the other decks in terms of what we have going on in the meta. Mono white staying pretty consistent. Mono black control doing a little bit better there. Now, as we get to the more competitive scene here, we get to platinum, things move a little bit, gets a little bit tighter. We see mono green Stompy again doing pretty well in terms of what's going on, but again, similar pattern here in terms of the overall numbers when we look at the competitive scene. So we're going to break this down for you here one by one. You can look at each of these. Don't feel free to pause or come back, and you'll get a nice take in terms of what you need here for your week, depending on where you're at. Now, a lot of folks begin to move through at this part of the program for the month, so that's pretty important. We see a couple things move around here as it turns getting up there. We see that Orzhov control in there and diamond as well. Let's get to mythic, because that's what a lot of people like to see. Is it turns actually doing the best? Mono green Stompy followed by mono white aggro, Jeskai turns being in there. Azor's control also popping in, dimmer control as well. So a host of things happening at the mythic level, a little bit different representation in terms of the competitive scene. So let's pull this all the way back out. That's best of one for standard this week. Next, we're going to look at best of 3. Best of 3 still being dominated by mono white aggro. We got green Stompy, Jund mid-range, Is It Dragons, Rakdos, Grixis turns all being in there. Then again, you can look at the top end here, heavily dominated by mono white aggro. Is It turns, mono green Stompy. So look at this. You can see the powerhouse just continuing to climb here in terms of the meta. So very, very interesting to see that. Dimmer control had been doing fairly well and then kind of fell back off. We see Jund mid-range slowly kind of creeping back up. And then as we look at some of the win rates, we see the same here in terms of what's going on. Rakdos Vampires really, really losing a lot of that steam in terms of the win rates there. So let's go ahead and look at the more competitive scene. Again, not too much happening there, just more towards the lower end of the spectrum, and still looking fairly consistent. So the same thing, we'll blow it all out. Generally not going to find anything here at some of these lower levels till we get to gold, just because that's when people tend to pick up and play. This Rakdos Vampires doing very well in the gold space relative to some of the other spots. Jund mid-range doing really well. In platinum, we got Azor's control popping up, Grow Werewolves popping up there as well. For those of you playing that space, diamond, it changes quite a bit. We got Grixis turns here as a big piece. Mono white aggro, huge 27%. Last but not least, let's look at that lovely mythic spot. Boom, here we go. Is It turns dominating mythic. We got Mono Green Stompy having a great win rate there. Is it Turns doing well? Mono White Aggro doing well? Is it Dragons? Jund midrange, and then everything else it's sub 50%. So very important to keep an eye on that and see what is happening. So let's blow out here and we'll pop over to historic best of one. So historic, we got a little bit to talk about today. We'll cover that here in a little bit, but Squirrel Twin still doing really well. Azor's Auras, Mono Green Elves, Leslie Angels, Is It Phoenix, Mono Red Burn, Gruul Shaman, Mono White Life Gain. You can see percentage of the field here really dominated between Squirrel Twin and Elves. Everything else kind of running around the 5%. We can see that pickup still driving that consistency. Elves still doing well, and everything else there we can see the win rates kind of playing around. Azor's Auras starting to pick up. Mono Red Burn starting to pick up there as well. When we get to the competitive scene, let's see what we got. Not too much in terms of changes, so let's go all the way out. Again, we typically don't see too much of this stuff start to get picked up until we get to gold. Just tends to happen because that's just the way it works. We got Niv Mizzet popping in there. Mono Red Goblins also popping in there, so that's pretty important. We start to see some of these changes. We got Gruul Shaman in there. And as we get more competitive, we get to Diamond, Jeskai Control popping in, and then a Rakdos Goblins variant. And then last but not least, let's get to Mythic. Mythic, we got Jund Sacrifice at the top. And Rakdos Arcanist in there as well, and Selesnya Enchantress. So that's pretty big to see that. Again, we see some of the changes here at the top end in terms of stuff played as well. So we're going to go all the way back out again and jump into our best of 3 ladder. Best of 3, we got some interesting stuff. Golgari Sacrifice. So that's a new one popping up. I don't think that was there last week. So that's a big one. We got a Selesnya combo, Niv still in there, so that's pretty important to see as we look out some of these things changing here in terms of win rates getting a little bit tighter, but very interesting. Jund Sacrifice win rates getting much better there. As we get to the competitive space of best of 3, we see a couple things moving. We saw it Is It Phoenix move around there, as well as some of these other things here at the top end, and again win rates starting to get a little bit tighter. Some of the stuff here getting a little bit tighter, but Is It Phoenix certainly being one of the top played decks, along with 5-color Niv still and Selesnya Humans. So we'll go back out like we do again, expecting it more at gold if we see anything before we get to platinum. Here we go. Where we will begin to start to see in the competitive space here. There we go. Jeskai Control in there. Rakdos Arcanist popping in. Let's go ahead and get to Diamond, that competitive scene. A big shift. Gruul Shaman doing very well there. So that's pretty important to pay attention to and keep in mind. Again, not necessarily one of the most heavy played decks, but a portion of that. And then we get to best of 3 at the top, and Mono Red Madness crushing it right now in the Mythic space, but still being one of the lowest played decks. And then again, we have everything else here. So that is what we have for Historic this week. So some big changes there, some new decks popping and cropping in. We got the Golgari Sacrifice like we talked about as well. Let's now go check out Historic Brawl. Historic Brawl, what do we have in terms of changes? Kinnan, Halana, and Alina partners, so that's new. We got the first Sliver, and then Toxrill, the Corrosive, popping in there too. So a couple different changes here in the meta right now. People trying out some other stuff. 2% pretty good. We can see a lot of this stuff popping up and popularity getting real popular, with some of the popularity getting real popular with some of the new stuff here with the new sets. So that's pretty cool to see that. You can see some of these win rates here as they kind of play out. Which is pretty neat as well. So that is Historic for us. So we'll pop all the way back over to Standard. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the key stuff. So again, in terms of the big pieces here, we talked about Historic making waves. So we got the return of the Innistrad Championship here, kicking off here pretty soon. So keep that in mind. Innistrad Championship on December 3rd. Brand new formats. Well, Standard looks different again with the addition of Crimson Vow. So that's going to be a big thing to keep in mind in terms of what's coming up. So big pieces, big changes here coming up because of some of the bannings. So we'll keep an eye on that and what happens. Next, in terms of this week, we had the 200 Good Game Tour on MTG Melee. Very, very popular tournament, about 100 players in this one. We can see big pickups here with mono white aggro, and then is it control? Lots of domination here in terms of what's going on, certainly having an impact on the meta. We can go look at percent play and number of decks. Lots of decks there, 55, 61% with Gen Treasures, 65 with mono green aggro. Again, not a ton of decks, but really heavily focused on the top end there, reflective of what we have going on in Arena. So those are the big pieces. Again, we covered off some of the stuff coming up here, which is going to be some big stuff. We haven't had, minus the previous week, some of the Red Bull stuff, some other tournaments out there. We saw a lot of influx. Obviously, we had Vegas this past weekend as well. But there, obviously, it was focused on Modern, so a little bit different. Hopefully, everyone that was out there had fun as well. So, Planeswalkers, hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving here in the States. For those of you around the world, I hope you had a nice Thursday, happy Thursday, and you enjoy today's episode of Friday Night Meta. Flip me like if you did. If you got a question, if you got a comment, here for you, let me know down below. Love to discuss these things, or feel free to hop on that Discord server, my friends, where you will also find a lot of great information in the multiverse on my website and those things as well. Last but not least, stay connected. Great ways to do that, and stay up to date on what we got going on. Flip me that sub and that like again, and we'll see you again soon. Until next time, you take care. We got a lot more coming your way. We got standard top decks, historic top decks, jank. We're gonna get back into historic Brawl. Hopefully a tournament here soon, where I can get some time and focus. Hopefully things are starting to normalize a little bit here in the family household, the Mythras multiverse household. Lastly, we got the fast facts stuff, which is pretty neat. Stay up to date on those. And on top of that, our weekly series like this, Friday Night Meta, and the tier list. So lots of things coming your way, Planeswalkers. Looking forward to it as we move into the end of this month and then to the end of the year here soon, which is pretty crazy. So stay safe, take care, lots of things happening. And until next time, Mythras out.